So I just recently got back from a trip traveling from my home in Colorado all the way to Malaysia, basically the opposite side of the world, including a 4-day pit stop in Amsterdam. And that trip gave me the opportunity to test out the new jet lag advisory feature that just came out with Garmin's new Marq Gen 2 line of luxury sports watches. The jet lag advisor feature is a new feature giving you customized guidance on things like when to sleep, when to seek light, when to avoid light, and even suggestions on naps or caffeine, all designed to help offset the effects of jet lag. And this trip with a massive 15-hour time difference between Malaysia and Colorado was a pretty good test to see if all that guidance could actually help with the jet lag between all my stops. Now, although the jet lag advisory feature did come out alongside the Marq Gen 2, this feature will also be officially rolling out to other Garmin devices like the Fenix 7 and Epix Gen 2 sometime in 2023 via a software update. I don't have an exact date on that quite yet, but I'll definitely have updates about them on my Twitter or Instagram whenever those drop, so stay tuned. So for anyone who's flown across numerous time zones, you're very familiar with the effects of jet lag where your internal clock is thrown off, and Garmin's jet lag feature can help with personalized guidance to help with those transitions. Of course, it's not like a magic pill or anything like that, but it does provide helpful reminders to ease with those time zone differences and hopefully prevent full-on zombie mode. Now, if you are already a frequent worldwide traveler, a lot of these suggestions are probably things you already know, like slowly transitioning your sleep times before your trip by a few hours ahead or behind to ease with the time zone differences. I've been doing a lot of overseas trips over the last 4 to 5 years, which has allowed me the opportunity to learn some of these tricks, and I have to say that the guidance that the jet lag advisor feature provides is in general pretty spot on. And what's cool about the jet lag advisor feature too is that it's not only for during your travels, it also gives you guidance leading up to your trip and guidance after your trip to help battle the effects of jet lag. So first things first, to get the jet lag advisor feature set up, you'll first want to go to the Garmin Connect smartphone app and then head over to the training and planning section under the More tab. And since it does provide guidance leading up to your trip, you want to try to set this up at least a few days before your departure. So to start, we need to add some trip details, and we'll first start with your departure city. So here I just enter in Denver, but you can always just use the current location if you'd like. And then after that, we need to enter our departure date and departure time. Now, my first stop was Amsterdam, and I was staying there a few days before I went on to my next destination. But if you just have a shorter layover, less than a day or just a few hours, you just want to enter your final destination here. You don't need to enter in any short layovers, as you can see up here how they say to not enter connecting flights. So next, I'll also go ahead and enter in my arrival date and arrival time at my first destination. And since I do have another destination city, instead of clicking next, I'll actually click on add next destination. So it's nice that they do build in that capability for a multi-stop trip. And then from here, it's basically like the last screen where I need to enter in the departure date and the departure time, and the departure city is already filled in from the last screen. And then rinse and repeat with any other destination cities, dates, and arrival times that you may have. So after this stop, it was actually time to head back the other direction, back to Amsterdam for a quick stop before I headed home. So again, I just go ahead and enter in all the pertinent details. And then finally, since this was my last stop before heading back home, instead of clicking on add another destination, I just click on next to enter in my return trip details. And then after you've entered in all the details of your trip, this is what it looks like with all your travel plans. Now, like I was mentioning earlier, you want to try to set up your trip in the jet lag advisor at least 3 days in advance of an overseas trip like this, because it does give you guidance leading up to your trip to help you get prepared for the time change. So for example, on the day before my flight around 8 o'clock in the morning, up popped an alert to be active, which would help jumpstart my day. And then if we take a look at the actual jet lag advisor widget on the Marq II itself, here's where you can see how the trip is all set up, where it shows my local time versus my destination time, having an 8-hour time difference I'll need to overcome, and the fact that, yup, I'll likely be experiencing some serious jet lag, and some further suggestions on avoiding bright light before bedtime and going to bed earlier to offset the time difference. And then fast forward to later that night, the night before my flight, around 8 p.m. or so, I got an alert that it was almost bedtime and to try to avoid light. And then in the jet lag advisor widget, you can also see the timeline here that I should now be avoiding light and I should probably go to bed by around 9 p.m. Now, with all this guidance, at the moment, it's currently just using your sleep history to tailor all these suggestions. So I typically go to bed around 10 p.m. and then get up around 6 a.m. or so. So that was only about an hour shift from my normal routine. Having done this trip many times before, I would have probably preferred the bedtime reminder to be about maybe 1 hour earlier, like maybe 7 p.m. instead, just to give me a little bit more ahead. Because for these types of trips to Europe, I typically like to get up around 3 to 4 in the morning, which is exactly what I did the morning of my flight. Oh, and really quick, if you're finding the information in this video to be useful, do me a favor, just quickly hit that like button down below. It's a small little thing that you can do to help this video and the channel quite a bit, and I appreciate it. Now, fast forward to the next morning and the day of my actual departure, and here's what it looks like in Garmin Connect, where it suggests to seek light around 4 a.m. or so, which would be about noon Amsterdam time, and to be active around 5:30 a.m. to around 8 a.m. just to get my body awake before my flight. But just a quick note though is that although it does factor in your sleep history into the jet lag advisor, it doesn't currently take into account your typical workout schedule, but Garmin did say that they're looking into some other factors like this in the future for the guidance. And then from here, it suggests that I should avoid light from about noon local time, which would be about 8 p.m. Amsterdam time, and then to try to get to sleep around 3 p.m. local time, which that's the time that I'll be on the plane, as we can see from that little travel icon in white. And then literally about 10 minutes after I took off, around 4 p.m. local time, which would be midnight Amsterdam time, up popped an alert to try to avoid light, which is exactly the kind of guidance I would want to be seeing at that time to get ahead of the new time zone. Now, if we take a look at the timeline again on the Jet Lag Advisor widget for the tail end of the flight, here's where it suggests to seek light around noon Amsterdam time, which would be about 4 a.m. Colorado time. And then as soon as I get off the flight, it suggests to be active. And then later on that night, I should start to avoid light around 8 p.m. and get to sleep around 10 p.m. Amsterdam time, which would actually be around 2 p.m. Colorado time. And in terms of the suggestion to be active as soon as I got off the flight, well, that's already a trick I try to employ where I try to get in a workout as soon as I land pretty much anywhere, unless it's like a late night arrival or something like that. And that's exactly what I did that day. So I just hopped on a Peloton bike and did about an hour workout just to get my body moving, which is about 7:30 a.m. Colorado time and 3:30 in the afternoon in Amsterdam. And then around 8 p.m., I got both an alert to start avoiding light as well as a bedtime reminder to get in bed in about 1 hour to advance my body clock. And did I follow that bedtime reminder? Nope, not even close, where I ended up going to bed around midnight, spending nearly 2 hours awake in the middle of the night, and then finally getting up around 10:30 in the morning. And then when I finally did wake up the next morning, this is what the Jet Lag Advisor widget looked like at 10:54 a.m. Amsterdam time, and it said it should feel like around 4:54 a.m. Colorado time, and I had already offset the time difference by about 2 hours. And then for the timeline of the day, it said to seek light until about 3 p.m. and then try to be active from about noon to 4 p.m. And again, I think all of this lined up and it was all pretty good advice. And then by the next morning, so this is 2 days after my arrival, it now said that my body should probably only be feeling about a 5-hour difference. So basically in about 2 days time, it offset the time difference by about 3 hours. It usually takes me at most about 3 days to get used to about an 8-hour time difference. So I think the time difference that the display is probably more on the conservative side, but maybe for someone who isn't used to these sort of trips, it's perfectly fine. But here's the thing, I had another flight coming up the very next day to travel yet another 7 time zones. So let's see how to handle this variable. So here's the night before my next flight to Malaysia, which is 7 hours ahead of Amsterdam. And what you can see from the timeline here is that it's suggesting to be active from about 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. and actually try to seek out light from about 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. and then go to bed around 11 p.m. so I could get up at 7 a.m. So what we can see here is that the Jet Lag Advisor feature is making a bit of an adjustment for the next destination by moving forward the guidance a bit, which does seem to make sense since my next destination was 7 hours ahead. But here's something I noticed on the day of my flight, which was just a little bit odd to me. So this is about 4 hours before my flight, around 5 p.m. Amsterdam time. And the only guidance it gave me was to try to avoid light during my flight, but it didn't actually suggest for me to sleep leading up to or during that 12-hour flight. But that's something that I would have probably expected since my flight departed at 9 p.m. Amsterdam time. Now, if we fast forward a bit, this is about 1 hour before landing in Malaysia, so around 3 p.m. Malaysian time, 8 a.m. Amsterdam time, and I would have probably thought that the advisor would have given me advice to seek out light during the 3 to 4 hours after my flight, but it did say to try to avoid light from around 8 p.m. onwards and to try to get to bed around 8 p.m. Malaysian time. And then lo and behold, around 7 p.m. it did give me an alert that it was almost time for bed. But if you've been to Malaysia, you probably know about the food, and there was no chance in hell I was going to bed that night without crushing some Malaysian food. Seriously, if you like food, Malaysia should absolutely be at the top of your list. Anyhow, somehow, even with the massive time difference and all that travel, I still was able to get somewhat normal and surprisingly good sleep that night, like nearly what I would get at home. But as you can see here, the next morning at 7:40 a.m. Malaysian time, the Jet Lag Advisor showed that it may feel like 4:40 in the afternoon in Colorado, but I was feeling surprisingly acclimatized. But totally as expected, it said I should probably try to be active from about 9 a.m. onwards to delay my body clock, and as usual, an alert popped up reminding me of that. And what I also like about the Jet Lag Advisor feature, including the bedtime reminders, the be active reminders, as well as the seek light reminders, is that there's also little reminders about things you can do throughout the day if you feel groggy. Like here at noon Malaysian time, which is 5 a.m. Amsterdam time and 9 p.m. Colorado time, up popped an alert to suggest that if I'm feeling tired, I probably have about a 2-hour window to get in a nap or consume some caffeine to keep me going throughout the day without falling asleep at 5 p.m. Those were just really nice reminders to have. And then if we fast forward to my final flight home from Amsterdam to Colorado, so this is right before takeoff, around 11 a.m. in Amsterdam and around 3 a.m. back in Colorado. And it suggests to avoid light for the first 3 hours of the flight. And then it actually suggests to start seeking light after that. So basically for the entire flight back to Colorado to really try not to sleep. And that actually does make a lot of sense, because if I were to sleep on the plane, that would delay my body clock, and by the time I landed in Colorado, I may have actually gotten too much rest, which would have prevented me from sleeping later that night. Anyhow, let's fast forward now when I landed back in Colorado to show you what kind of guidance it gives you after your travels, because that's obviously very important too to get you back into the swing of things in your local time zone. So here's right when I landed in Denver around 5 p.m. Colorado time, and there it is, a massive 15-hour time difference from Malaysia, which was just 2 days ago, and it said that my body clock should feel like around 7 a.m. And honestly, after spending nearly 50 hours on planes in a span of about 2 weeks, it didn't really matter what time it said it should feel like, because I was just tired, so tired. But in terms of the timeline guidance it was suggesting to go to bed around 8 p.m. and then get up around 6 a.m., which is really only about an hour or two off from my normal sleep schedule. However, it is also a whopping 10 hours of sleep that they're suggesting, which all does make sense since it did advise me to try not to sleep during the entire flight home. So again, this is all in an effort to get me readjusted to my local time zone. And how well did I do on that advice? Well, not so great, and my body clock was all sorts of messed up, and this was the kind of sleep I got with that much travel. So you can see that although I was in bed for nearly 10 hours, I only got a little over 5 hours of sleep. Anyhow, throughout the week after my travels, I received plenty of alerts just like during the trip, but these were all designed to get my body used to my local time zone. Like here at 9 a.m. the next morning after I arrived back home, there's an alert to get active, there are bedtime alerts to get in bed at a decent hour, and overall some pretty good advice to get me back on track. Overall, I think it did a really good job in terms of the suggestions during my trip to overcome the effects of jet lag, but I would have actually liked it to be a little bit more proactive in terms of the suggestions leading up to my trip, like possibly getting a little better head start on some of the time differences. And then it also did seem to fumble a little bit with that extra destination to Malaysia, where I would have probably expected it to suggest to sleep at least for a portion of that flight over. But even with those few quirks, I have to say, for being a pretty experienced traveler and having some methods I already know about that help me cope with larger time zone differences, I really enjoyed having this feature on this trip. Again, if you already have a lot of overseas travel experience, I think a lot of this should come naturally to you, but just having those alerts, and especially in regards to avoiding light and seeking light, they were just nice reminders to help me stave off the jet lag. Anyhow, if you have any questions about the jet lag advisor feature that I didn't cover in this video, feel free to leave those in the comments section down below. And on your way down there, if you found the information in this video useful, do me a favor and also hit that like button, and also subscribe to the channel for plenty more sports tech videos that are coming soon. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.